Hi, and welcome back to Mr. Opera, and today we're going to be reading some more Manuel Garcia, specifically The Hints on Singing by Manuel Garcia. But before we get to the book, because I realize, I don't know, reading the book is a little bit dry maybe, I've got a user request to cover some cool audio and video. Just a second here, let me adjust myself. So that's thanks to Ivo Romanek, Dobrej, and we're gonna listen to first some Galliano Mazzini, who's pretty freaking amazing. And I'm sure you'll agree. And we're just gonna take a listen to a few examples of tenors singing the same aria. And then maybe if we have time, we're gonna look at Ivo's other clip that he wanted reviewed, which was a couple of low-voiced gentlemen. But maybe I'll do that next time. Because I think we can learn a lot about vocal modes, metal, density, and that kind of thing by listening to some of these examples. And if you're here from This Is Opera, and you're watching Mr. Opera right now, then you may enjoy this talk, because we're going to do some comparison of at least one so-called modern tenor, but we're going to look at some tenors through the years, and we're going to take a look at how they differ in their sound and try to give some good vocabulary to that. Hopefully that'll help those of you who are still really early on in your singing career or singing journey or whatever, and still willing to change your mind about some things, or maybe you're a little bit frustrated with the kind of things you're quote-unquote allowed to sing, and maybe that's sometimes smart, but maybe it's a little bit arbitrary. It's kind of based on nothing, and I think that by having some words for the different kind of sounds a tenor could make, for instance, if you're a tenor yourself, or you want to sing tenor, then you know what to ask for. And even if in the end you conclude like, okay, well, that's not realistic, you know what is not realistic. You have a definition for things. So we're gonna take a look at some singing here, and hopefully I'll get away with this. You know, there's some issues with with copyright and all these things when you're doing classical music. There's public domain stuff, and then there's stuff like this. I'm not sure if this is public domain or what. So I'm gonna do the normal YouTube React thing where we have to keep it a small part of the screen, and since it's just audio, well, basically I get nailed on every video for some kind of copyright something. So well, let's see how this goes. So first up is Galliano Mazzini, and then well the next one will be evident as soon as he's singing. So here we go. Galliano Mazzini singing Celeste Aida. And if someone in the chat has some feeling about the volume levels, let me know if it's too loud or clipping too much.
Un esercito di frodi da me guidato, e la vittoria e il flauto.
So far we're in like a fully metallic thing. Really metallic, fuller density, not doing any of the stuff Garcia's talking about. But let's listen. I just want to hear what the first phrase was like, because usually they're trying to be quiet there. So let's see. We're gonna listen for the vocal mode here. Okay, so he's in the same vocal mode as he's in for the whole rest of this thing. He's not really doing any kind of special quiet deal. So we'll talk about what that is in a minute when we have something to compare it to.
Un esercito di frodi da me guidato.
You can notice that. So Garcia was telling us about turning this into as you go up and all that, and he's not doing that at all, not even a bit of this kind of rounding, especially if you listen to the might be a different story, but let's listen a bit more. This very... Let's see, that didn't work so well. Very bottom note. The very last note of Vittoria, that's impressive. I mean, the whole thing's impressive, but that he's landing in the same vocal mode. Basically, he's not switching to a neutral mode. He's not losing control of the vocalization, of the coordination, basically. And then most tenors wipe. I guess it's not a big deal. They don't care so much. I care about this very bottom note. And no, it's not as loud as a bass or anything like that, but the way he's singing this isn't gonna have trouble being understood most of the time in the theater. The orchestra still has to be careful a little bit, but when this becomes neutral, which is often the big risk when you're coming off of a higher note and going into a lower register for a tenor, then you might get a kind of wipeout or like a fuzzy sound or just inaudible. Been there many times.
esercito di frodi da me guidato e la vittoria e il flauto di mempi tuoi.
Himself as he holds that upper note on Vittoria, just like a little bit long, so that he establishes the bigness of the phrase, whatever, before he goes into this really unsuitable range. A little bit of the rounding. So instead of like or something, we have a kind of sound, but just a little bit. So the solution for E, which isn't really gonna work in a metallic vocal mode, except for something with reduced density. He doesn't want to be stuck in reduced density, and he wants to stay metallic. So he's got choices to make. And the direction he takes his E vowel is to eh. And if you listen carefully when he lowers the pitch, because he doesn't bother to modify away, then he gives it away. But if you didn't hear that, you almost wouldn't have known that he's not singing a real E vowel. It's really not close. But the pitch combined with, I guess it's combined with this harmonic coupling between the second formant and the third harmonic. And there's a certain amount of darkening that goes along with that. And all those things put together make it register more like E. And then also some tricks, some misdirection and things. But let's hear it again. So you hear when he comes down that it's vinto, not vinto. But because most of that's on that high note, it registers as E, even though it's not even close. It's a complete, I would say it's a vowel substitution. If you have that vowel in whatever language you're thinking in, it's a substitution. And if you don't have that vowel, I guess it's just a modification. But and just to be clear about the reasons for that, other than to keep it very metallic, it's also to have the mouth very open. So if you don't want to go like E, because to make an E sound, what you do really is you have to lower the first resonance of the voice, and then you're going to raise the second resonance of the voice so it's far away from it, and you get E. And if I start raising the first resonance of the voice, it goes from E to eh. And if I want to, I can make it sort of eh. But I can't make this E sound with my mouth like this. The closest I could get is and that's essentially what he's doing. You combine that with a really high pitch. Well, it's not that high, but you can combine that with the pitch that he's singing, and you get the audience is fooled into thinking they heard E. But if you listen carefully, when he comes down, you hear it. on the way down. Could make some language guy happy somewhere. So everything there is just following these same rules. It's really simple what he's doing. It's great. It's just this is, we'll see in a bit. This is like more Corelli than Corelli. Yeah. So you guys in the chat, let me know if like the sound levels are working and everything. Okay. See here. Okay, that E sound, now we have when he wants to be kind of more tender. Now we have this kind of thing that Garcia was talking about, where E becomes what he calls French oo. So, So we hear here this kind of ul, if you listen carefully. Really handy trick. But not for power. Hear it? Wait, one more shot. So this, forget what Garcia's suggested modification was. We can look again today. But he's changing trono to trano. Just and the reason is, well, it's the metal thing. But also, it's just that when you get a bigger mouth shape, in general, that's going to be transferring energy better out of your vocal tract and into the air around you. So, there's all this fancy stuff, you know, all the fancy, cool acoustics, all the kind of, I don't know what you would call it, like, the fancy stuff, you know, nonlinear source filter interactions and, you know, resonance and acoustics, you know, all that stuff. A lot of times that's great, but then other times it's really just simple, like open your mouth and we can hear you better. But then that is what makes the interesting problems. Like, okay, well now how do I articulate anything? So yeah. Now we're getting tender, so instead of this getting brightened or anything to maximize the metal, that's rounded now to oh. I don't know how I lost volume here. 1 second. Okay. Sorry, I just have to stop. Corelli's competing here in the background for some reason. Okay. Here we go. it seems like a small thing, but something like mio, how he sings mio in that of mio pensiero, is very interesting. It's in this range where you hear, I think, when the choices get made that make this spinto or more lyric, shall we say, fuller or kind of reduced. Let me just back up here. So it's like starting in neutral, this phrase, I think, which he doesn't use much, but he's getting softer with that. And then his E is more like a real E. But then by the time he's finished the word, you could say he's revving up the engines for the end of the phrase. And he's gonna switch what he's doing there right in the middle, and it gives him a way to move forward without getting stuck in, well, some of the things we'll see later. But so here the metal comes in. It's actually abrupt, but he does a really good job distracting you from it, because he's changing intentions and changing directions in the middle of that word. Let's hear that again. Let's hear a bit more. And then when he comes out of that, the pensiero winds up this like a nasty sound, and it's great. It comes out tender overall and loving overall, because he gets that done at the beginning of the phrase. Let's just hear one more time, because I thought that was really cool. And now instead of ooh, which is also just not going to work really with this mode that he's in, I guess that's edge. You can try to do like you can try to do a couple things. You can try to do more of a substitution. So like instead of ooh, you have to. And then the other way you can kind of do it, which I don't think he's doing here, is you kind of pretend like you have a peanut and you're holding the peanut between your tongue and your soft palate. Ooh, oh, 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 oh. And then as you go higher, the peanut's going to get bigger. And if you do that with your tongue in the wrong place, you might get this kind of sound. Like a sketch kind of. Let me make an offer that you can't refuse, kind of thing. Yeah, but going on. To di mia vita instead of tu. That's amazing. That's really hard. These kind none of this stuff that Garcia is talking about with the rounding out and darkening the vowel. If you're using this vocal mode a lot, you find that, which is edge in complete vocal technique, you find that the vowel eh, vowels that sound like eh anyway, like that sound, are kind of in the center of the mode, if you will. It's like the more eh you make it, the easier it gets. So you don't need to modify away from that for this purpose. Maybe for something else you would, but not for this. So obviously we're not doing the super piano ending, and that makes sense. Like, why? How would he if he was gonna do this in falsetto, which is what all these tenors doing that sing it pianissimo. It's a falsetto. I don't care if it's not breathy. It can have a higher or lower closed quotient. I don't care. It's still the mechanism that is the same mechanism that like the sopranos are using. The same thing that Garcia was talking about with the middle voice and the female voices. It's that. And if you're doing that, then you have to find a place where you're going to suddenly drop all of this density, and you're going to suddenly stretch the vocal folds and slip into a falsetto while tying everything together and making it make sense as a classical phrase. It's not happening. It's the people who do it, they're awesome too, but I don't know if we'll have any super quiet endings today. Maybe. But the people who do it do not also tend to do this fuller density, completely as metallic as you can kind of thing with the rest of their singing. So they're combining neutral with metallic already during their phrasing, and the sound is not as powerful overall. So that's him. Let's see who's next on the. Let's see if I can get my thing playing here. So next we got Carlo Bergonzi. We can hear now there's a different thing going on. Alright, so let me see. I'm going to check the chats now. And what do you guys think some of the differences are? If anyone's around. Let's see. Hey, Evo, what do you got to say about these differences? And no one in the chats otherwise, so. Okay, I'll just go on with my take on this then. But you guys pipe up if you've got some ways of explaining some of the differences we're hearing here. But I would say that these coordinations that Bergonzi is using are not all lighter. Some is the same, especially higher in the voice. But then some are much, much less metallic. So you can hear the sound comes out in a way smoother, not not as rough. You hear less roughness in the sound. Less, probably, if you're looking in the, this whole singer's formant range, or this 2500 to 3500 range, there's probably, it's not that there's nothing, but just less, maybe. And often his closed quotient is also less than the last singer. So his closed quotient, it almost sounds like breathy, or like swelling or something, or like, almost like a little bit of this in the sound. So some differences already, but the main thing to me is that instead of just staying with this as much density as possible in the sound, Bergonzi is lighter, especially in the middle of the voice. When he gets to the top, he's mostly, or a lot, going for the same approach, but so far, but we'll see. Not always. So that was a different approach from what the last singer. So our first singer is opening his mouth as much as possible, and when he comes down off of that pitch, you hear that the resulting vowel is really just like kind of thing. I don't know if that was that wasn't the same spot, but anyway, when he comes down off of a higher note and he's singing the same sort of E-based vowel, you hear either something that's totally or something that's going to be modified more towards And then I would say Bergonzi goes more for or And you can also watch, it's nice that you can see him here, but you can see that the lips move away from the teeth to do this. So it's more and it's a rounder thing, instead of this and that would be a lot less powerful, I imagine. I mean, we're not there, but I can just tell you that's a lot less powerful, but it's still very nice. So I don't want to. These are both really great and famous tenors. So I'm not saying like one is right and one is wrong. Yeah, Dove. It does sound more. I would say if we're deciding like who's closer to the speech vowels, than Bergonzi. And usually I think that using or it sounds closer to E to most people, I think. But it's less metallic and less powerful. It's just always going to be less powerful. You can't have your cake and eat it too, basically. Another thing to say about this thing is I would call it taming the sound. I think it's easy. It's going to make it easier. It's going to be more stable and easier to articulate. But without even hearing it, if you just saw the shape of the mouth, you would know it's less powerful. Yeah. It's also, by the way, a longer vocal tract. So this kind of coordination on the same person compared to the is a longer vocal tract, even if the larynx isn't raising. So the larynx is down, I think, in both of these cases, pretty much as far as it goes. But the vocal tract is set to a different length, but from the other end, from the mouth end. But when you shorten the vocal tract from either end, you still change area of interest number 1. So you still change all the resonances of the vocal tract, and then you also change the locations of the other areas of interest, except for number 3. Anyway. So really, so he's sticking to some really diction coach happy making Italian. So he's celeste. He's making a difference between e and e, and now you're getting to those differences. If you're demanding those differences, basically you can't do this in fuller density and in fully metallic vocal modes. If that's something that matters, and if it matters consistently, then you wind up with acoustic choices that are diction choices. You blur the line between acoustic and diction things. So it's something to decide if you're singing, well, not just this repertoire, I think any repertoire. I would contend is actually with an open nose. It's actually slightly nasal, which we were not hearing at all. And then nasality would be another way to tame the sound, to make it easier to handle the tuning and articulation and all that stuff. That's nasal. So this is celeste ai don, kind of don. Let's hear it one more time. Don, don. That one was slightly different, but it's the same thing. He's nasalizing it to basically it makes it easier. If you open the nose, you can do more vowels in the same position or in a similar position without wiping out. So a little bit Freddie Mercury, but okay. It's a thing that a lot of tenors do. Also nasal. But you have you can see that to make a softer sound, no matter whether you're overall singing with a more open mouth or a more closed mouth. So he's singing with a more closed mouth, right? But still, when he wants to get softer than that, he's closing his mouth even more. And that's... Let's watch it again. How small the mouth is for Adele. And the previous singer, you would not have seen this. So that's basically just the same as speech. And then, yeah, I don't know. And that would be, it's less powerful for the amount of energy you put in. So if you're really good at not over singing, then cool. But if you tend to over sing, then this would be death, this coordination, because you would try to make the sound anyway. And that's when, you have the knife at a gunfight. Nasal. I think that ooh as well. So he's using this a lot. And I've heard some people identify that as more lyric. they say, they'll say, oh, that guy sounds like a real, Italian tenor or whatever. And it's not, I'm not saying this is consistent or it's a real definition, but usually the guy that they're talking about is mixing in nasality for certain articulation moments.
Il tuo bel cielo vorrei rifarti le dolci brezze delle patria suole ponere al cerco sul crine posare per quel più
So you hear some, I guess it's distortion or something, and I don't think that's in the recording. That's from the vocal folds kind of wiping out during that note. But anyway, a lot of this leading up to this moment, this phrase, there's a couple of phrases leading up to this, we switched from the more quiet approach to the louder approach. He's having a bit more trouble with it, but he's trying to increase the density now in the metal, and you see that his mouth now is not so restricted in its opening. So now he's breaking Garcia's rule, but before that, he was doing what Garcia said to do, in my opinion. That in particular is a bigger mouth opening than we were used to. So that's hurting. He's in trouble there. I recognize a lot of the stuff that's happening to him as like, oh yeah, that sucks on that, because I know. You see the lips coming out a lot for this E, and I think whoever it was, I can't remember your name, sorry, and I can't read it, it's too small from where I can see, saying he was using just the E from speech. I think that's a good observation. He is. A lot of these. So let's try the next. This is just a troll. This is opera. Sorry, guys. Gotta turn this down. This is like neither of these. Much less at home analyzing this, but the most interesting difference is this kind of canoodle, a little bit of a canoodle to darken the sound, and that also makes a little bit of ring. Yeah, oddly I had to turn down the volume on this one because it was too loud. Just a troll. This is opera a little bit. Let's watch a little bit more. I just don't know what to say about this. Yeah, Dove. That's. I mean, it's not swallowing. I mean, it can't be literally, but it is. It's in that direction. The interesting thing about that is that where the tongue is going to is maybe not where you'd think. So if you watch my videos on vocal acoustics and visualizing vocal acoustics, for the first resonance of the voice, we have the most activity at 2 points. The very beginning of the vocal tract, where the larynx is, where the vocal folds are, and then the very end of the vocal tract. And they have opposite functions. So if you were to constrict the one that's at the vocal tract end at the beginning, that's going to raise all the resonances of the vocal tract. And if you constrict the one at the end, that's going to lower all of those same resonances. In theory, if you did both at the same time, you could cancel out the one with the other, as far as the resonance goes. And if you retract, then about 1/3 of the way between the larynx and the end of the vocal tract, when you go into that, when you constrict that area, it lowers the second resonance of the voice. But it doesn't do nearly as much to the first resonance of the voice because it's far away, or relatively further away, from the beginning of the vocal tract. So maybe watch the video, it helps. But you have to picture a gradient, and then for the first resonance, and then for the second resonance, it's like you have 4 gradients. And as you approach each area, the effect gets stronger. And as you go away from that area, the effect gets weaker, right? So if you were to really swallow your tongue, so push or pull your tongue in a way that it winds up actually all the way at the beginning of your vocal tract. So more swallowing, like really swallowing it, as far as geometry is, as far as the direction that you're going, that's not going to make this sound. That would make the first sound that we heard. And to some extent, the second, the second sound that we heard, that's also because there was some metal in the sound. For that, you need the same constriction. But this kind of sound, which some people call a knurtle, doesn't come so much from swallowing the tongue as it does from having it, I guess, somewhere more like 1/6 of the way, something like that, where you're close enough to kind of raise all the resonances. You're getting a little bit of ring by having the tongue close enough to the vocal, to the epiglottis, I guess, to the vocal folds. You're making the shape a little bit like a megaphone, but it's not all the way. So you get this kind of this kind of if I really exaggerate it and I push my tongue forward, now I have Miss Piggy, it's me, Kermit the Frog kind of sound. But if I anchor my voice, my neck, I mean, so he's doing this kind of thing, but he's really good at it. So you wind up with I don't know. It's like it's a lot of people like this tenor singing. So it's definitely professional tenor singing. Yeah. So we have U and E, kind of sound. But again, we have to be clear that the amount of skill needed to use that coordination to do this is really high. So there were some disputes with This Is Opera, where they said I'm saying it's all the same and blah, 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 blah. And that's not the point. If you're singing with fuller density and metallic and you think that that's better than singing with a knurtle, okay, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're better than Kaufman. To be better than Kaufman, you have to be better with your fuller density and metal than he is at singing with his knurtle. And for a lot of people, it's not the case. Yes, Di Stefano does do. But then we had Di Stefano on when he because he's really inconsistent. So there's recordings where he's not doing it at all. And then it's annoying because I say it's gonna sound like this and it sounds like someone else. Okay. Wow, that's hard. So he's got crazy control over his lips, I think. Kind of thing. Which I don't think is metallic. So, okay, so other than the... And by the he does use he's metallic sometimes. But I think the other one that we hear is like, it's kind of pseudo-metallic, sort of this grandpa kind of sound. But again, he's really good at it. But he knows exactly how to do that. So it comes out right. It's impressive. So, but anyway, what you have so far is 3 different ways that if you liked it, you could say that those are, I want to do it like this. And you shouldn't have to be doing it one way if you don't like it that way. But if that's your intention, to do it the way you want, I think it helps to be able to name it. What it is and what it isn't. So we don't need to see more of this. I guess the end. Oh, Mario Alonso was next for a reason, but let's see. Applause. Let's hear his. Falsetto. Or some definitely neutral. And I haven't heard anyone go from this fuller density metallic thing to this and then back, or it's just, you're choosing, are you going to do this pianissimo thing or are you going to do this metallic thing?
Thank you. Enrico, let's try the Celeste Aida with the recitativo.
And of course, this is overdubbed, but still.
Se quel guerriero fossi, se il mio sogno si avverasse.
I hope you figured out why I'm playing this after Kaufman. Because this is pretty famous.
Un esercito di prodi da me guidato.
A lot of the old school people will also say, Mario Alonso. That's the way to sing. But he seems to be closer to Kaufman. It's nicer as far as I don't know. To me, I like the beauty of it better. It's more beautiful, I think. and he's not trying to do this in an opera house. So that's also something to consider. You know, he gets to just sing it down or however he wants. But still, we see that he's not just singing soft. So let's... And this is overdubbed, but I think he was singing in this group. So as far as I know, the way they do these scenes is they mostly sing while they're filming it, even though that's not the audio that you're going to wind up hearing. But I'm not sure. Someone could correct me on that if you know something specific about movies. Oh, let me see if I can... Is the volume low on the... Is the volume low on the microphone? Is this better? Let's see. Dove. Let's see. Yeah, Dove, there's probably a recording of that, but there's not a whole bunch of recordings of Corelli doing that. So I think it winds up that most of the people who do it are going to pick one thing, you know, and they're not going to be just at the drop of a hat going from fully metallic to a falsetto. It's maybe on a recording or something, but I don't see it being reliable in a performance. Let's see. Okay. All right. So I think we're okay on volume, etc., etc. I'm gonna get back here. Yeah, the big thing to point out was the use of the knurtle. Is not something Kaufman invented.
Now
it's gone. That had it. I think he might be more metallic than Kaufman did. Reminds me of Jussi Björling a bit too with this. I mean, we could watch these all day, but
Thank you.
okay.
Enrico,
So that's the last. I
let's
think.
try.
Did I have another one? No. So just wanted to look at a selection of tenors singing the same thing. Thanks to Evo for the suggestion. I'm gonna see if anyone has any questions about. Yeah, but okay. Yeah, Dove, I agree with you. Most people who use, I would say that most people who use Kaufman's approach are not successful. I mean, most people who go for any of these approaches are not successful because it's hard. But of the skilled singers, I guess, you know, if you're a talented singer, I wouldn't recommend going first for this approach that Kaufman uses, and I would advise that it's difficult to be performance ready for most people if they're relying on this. Whereas, as thrilling as it is, and as dangerous sounding as it might be, the first example that we heard, if you're actually singing that way, is probably the safest and most sustainable, because you've got the vocal folds are very short, and you've got metal, and those things protect the voice, and that's probably slightly lower pressure than the Carlo Bergonzi example, but not low pressure. and probably higher pressure than what Kaufman is doing. As far as the actual pressure, I'm not talking about the subjective feeling of pressure or squeezing or anything like that. Like how much pressure is actually in the lungs, the subglottal pressure. It's probably highest with that, but what Bergonzi is doing, and you hear in the onsets, and I think people will then say, well, it must be onsets. It's like glottal onsets or something. They say are tiring for the voice, but I think what's tiring about doing it the way Bergonzi is doing is that it's not as loud. It's not as powerful, like inherently, but it's still got a volume range. So what you're going to do to try to make it loud enough is hang out at the upper end of the volume range that you're able to do, and it'll cost you. But still, it's metallic most of the time, etc., etc. That's going to be more sustainable than what Kaufman is doing for most people, I think. And then we don't have the example, but probably the least sustainable way I could think of is something like what Klaus Florian Vogt does, where you're completely in neutral and just happen to have a really freaking loud voice somehow. And that's great if you're Klaus Florian Vogt, right? But if you're not Klaus Florian Vogt, and you try to do that, the chances are you're gonna destroy yourself, just because it's bringing a knife to a gunfight. Yeah. So, but this first thing, I have to disagree with Garcia that this is gonna be, harmful. Not that Garcia specifically so far has said that, but with the female voices, he definitely said how I'll be careful taking metal up or something like that. He just calls it chest, but so let me check in with the chats real quick. I think I'm all caught up here. Yeah. This is Opera is not checking in today. I don't think. They're a little bit mad at me. It's finally but according to their analytics, it's still improving views more than it is taking away views. There's a few angry people who dropped their subscriptions to the channel, but otherwise, yeah. Okay, so let's take that away and let's get back to Hints on Singing by Manuel Garcia. And I guess I'm gonna just read a couple sections today because, we did this other stuff. Eventually, this will be something like Mr. Opera show, I guess, if I keep going. And we won't be having entire episodes dedicated to one thing. It'll be sections of like a podcast, I guess, with feature sections. But right now we're doing it this way. And before I get started with Garcia, I just need, it's not for me. This is for someone else who asked me to show this to you. So I apologize ahead of time. Yeah, when I get more smooth, I'll be learning how to do that while I prepare my Garcia here. So, we were talking about female voices, And we went through the registers, and now we've gotten to the head register. We have some water here, because I'm going to go into reading mode. So let's see. Maybe I should zoom it a bit more. Yeah. The head register. 12. I'll turn down my... 1 second here. Okay. What is the head register? This register forms the purest and brightest portion of the soprano voice, but frequently the charming softness, so pleasing in the high notes, is perversely turned into tormenting yells that almost injure the ear of the listener. I guess tough times teaching sopranos for us. I should just keep reading. Yeah. When singing a long scale, say a 12th, do you keep the same tint throughout? Oh, excuse me. 1 second. When singing a long scale, say a 12th, do you keep the same tint throughout? Answer. If the exact timbre shade were retained from top to bottom of a long scale, the effect would be discordant. To satisfy the ear with an impression of equality, the singer, by skillful gradation, must increase the roundness of the high notes, and reverse the process in descending. But does not this method introduce a real inequality in the vowel sound? It does. And the apparent equality of the notes in the scale will be the result of actual but well-graduated inequality of the vowel sound. Without this maneuver, the round vowels, which are suitable to the higher notes, would extinguish the ringing of the middle and lower notes, and the open vowels, which give éclat to the lower, would make the higher notes harsh and shrill. The neglect of this proceeding causes many voices to appear unequal, but, I repeat, it must be used with moderation and taste. Well, thank you to someone who just donated on coffee.com. Thank you very much. So, shall we look at this? Because this is some of what we just heard conforms to this, even though we're talking about sopranos here. But some of what was just looked at conforms to this, but some doesn't. Mostly it's this business of increasing roundness of high notes and then reversing that on the way down. And we saw one example where it's like, no, no, I'm not gonna bother. And then we saw other examples where it was either more necessary or it was the reason for a different vocal coordination. So either different vocal coordination is going to make that now necessary, or because if you find it necessary, you have to choose a different vocal coordination. Yeah. And he points out that when you go down, you want to brighten, basically, and when you go up, you want to darken. And that brightness gives éclat, some burstiness, I guess, to the explosion, to the lower notes. So 13. Male voices. Now we're gonna get into male voices, and let's see. I'll read a couple sections here. How are male voices to be treated? Basses, baritones, and tenors should commence their daily study with low and easy notes. These should be attacked with the stroke of the glottis on the open Italian vowels a, e, as they sound in the words alma, fede. So he's not. Oh, I should keep reading here. Why should you commence with an open timbre? Because in order to render the voice free and strong, the clear timbre is the most efficacious with the vowels just indicated. Basses and baritones should rise as far as, and then E natural. Tenors to F sharp. Are these high and open notes easily attained? The open and free timbre, which sometimes comes spontaneously, demands a long, patient, and careful study from singers who have veiled their organ too much. Those with this habit have great difficulty in giving the third, D to F, the third D to F, otherwise than veiled, and even then with effort and fatigue. Can you recommend some other method? The portamento. The student ought to start from a bright note and carry the voice to a veiled one, keeping the slur brilliant and ringing. Short scales of 3, 4, and 5 notes commencing from bright notes are also useful. Are not the chest notes in clear, bright timbre very shrill? When once the organ has been formed to the clear timbre, a slight veiling of the vowel will suffice to relieve the sound of its shrill or sharp quality. How long ought this study to last? No more than 10 minutes at a time, and the least symptom of fatigue or uneasiness should be the signal for a long repose. Now we've got some Hermann Klein notes here. So first you see the note on page 13, and that was for the stroke of the glottis, which we went over. And then the next Hermann Klein note, the term failed. Here signifies darkened or covered. So that's what Hermann Klein has to say, and we have this confusion that Garcia for some reason loves, where we have there's veiled versus clear, and for sound, and then there was veiled versus bright. And that was also clear. There was veiled versus clear for timbre. And he just kind of switches between the two, and he doesn't tell you which one he's switching to. So when he's talking about veiled versus clear sound, he means the open quotient, or the closed quotient. So let's just put CQ. And then when he's talking about the timbre, he's talking about the resonance. And they're different. Or the timbre or the vowel. The resonance or the vowel is for timbre. And so what he's saying, let's see. Yeah. He's saying basses, baritones, and tenors. Let me just get my highlighter here. Daily study. Terrible. daily study with low and easy notes. Which is really, I think, great advice. And with these glottal strokes, glottal attacks on a and e, okay? And he recommends, right, an open timbre so that you're not starting with u or with e or with o or something like that. He recommends a and eh. And he feels that these will help make the voice strong. I think it's just that it's going to be easier to find a metallic sound, especially with this eh. But also with the ah. The ah may be actually easier to find in the first place, and then the eh is going to be it's like overall the one you can push into the most, shall we say. And he's got different exercises here for the basses and the baritones. But I would do the same, actually. So he's got the basses and baritones ending at E natural and tenors at F sharp. But the acoustic things that are going to be going on with both voice types, shall we say, are going to be the same around these pitches. And then the options that you have later on are going to be the same around these pitches. And often you can split differences at E flat 4 kind of thing. The open and free timbre, which sometimes comes spontaneously, demands a long, patient, and careful study from singers who have veiled their organ too much. So he's saying that if you've been covering too much, if you have trouble going from D to F without covering, without darkening things, or rather he's saying if you cover too much you'll have difficulty there. So that's interesting. Probably he's dealing with people who are kind of stuck in neutral. I like to say that you have a letter, and that letter is going inside of an envelope. If the letter is what you're doing with your tongue, what you're doing inside your vocal tract, let the letter be dark and let the envelope be bright. So an example is if I open my mouth a lot, the envelope gets brighter. And if I start to close it, it gets darker. And also I can move my tongue around. Took me a second to get my bearings, but so in the first example, I'm making O by darkening the envelope, and in the second example, by darkening the letter that's inside the envelope. There's a little bit on the end, but not as much, and not this lengthening of the vocal tract like ow, ow, ow. Both of those lengthening the vocal tract, one more than the other. But yeah. So the idea is the way I go at it. Make you choose whether you have the envelope or the letter, dark or bright, and play with alternating them. And he's saying that you want to work with this open position. So a and e until you basically have learned this position, I think. And then if it's not working out to practice on a and e, he recommends a portamento. And so going from a bright note to a veiled one, keeping the slur brilliant and ringing. Interesting. So he wants you to practice changing the sound color, essentially, without affecting the source so much, without changing the vocal mode so much, or how much density you're using, I would say. But it's really confusing because of how he changes from talking about timbre to talking about what the source is doing, so what the vocal folds are doing. And he uses the same words, so that's really annoying. And he's not always telling you when he changed from the vowel or the resonance to talking about the source, the vocal folds, the organ, as he calls it. And from these singers who have veiled their organ too much. Stop veiling your organ. You'll grow hair on your palms or something. Anyway. So here, this bright and ringing, from a bright note carried to a veiled one, that looks like it's a sound color. Keeping the slur brilliant and ringing, that looks like source. So this is veiled versus bright, and then this is veiled versus clear and ringing in the same sentence. But it looks like keep the source the same, try to do a portamento while going from a brighter vowel to a darker vowel, to a rounded vowel, shall we say, and try to keep the vocal mechanism from getting veiled itself. I don't want to insult any of the tenors we just heard, so that's not my intention here. But it sounds a little bit to me like try not to get stuck in the trap that Bergonzi was getting stuck in. But that could be just my bias, because I've been so many times having the same problem on stage. Are not the chest high notes in clear bright timbre very shrill? And he says, as long as you can keep the timbre clear, so as long as you can keep the mechanism doing what you want to do, then slightly darkening the vowel is all you need to relieve the sound of any shrill or sharp quality. But I think, as we heard in some of the examples, it's not even an option sometimes. It's just not always... Okay, yeah, he's making that recommendation, and it's kind of like a compromise, I think. But maybe I think there's some singing that was developed after Garcia that was completely uncompromising and less concerned with really with such unification of the registers, with little shifts of tone color and stuff, and more interested in a big, impressive picture and hitting hard. You can think a little bit about throwing a really hard punch versus jabs and stuff. And in the same period we had Jack Dempsey. So the same thing happens in boxing, where people start hitting hard. They still move and stuff, and they still put on a show. Maybe they don't move as fast as people that are more or less just slapping each other. But it's great stuff. However, I'm not sure it goes back to Garcia. Yeah, I think we're seeing some of the stuff that he's recommending not to do is in this first example we looked at today. Another interesting thing here is he gives the boys twice as long as the girls to practice. Let me see, switch to my highlighter here. So the girls got 5 minutes and the boys get 10 minutes. Whoa, why is that doing that? I don't know how I got that. I was just trying to... Okay. 10 minutes at a time for the boys. And then these really long recovery periods whenever there's the slightest symptom of fatigue. I think that's more to do with his clients, his clientele. I don't know. But it's not a bad thing to set your practice goals at 10 minutes. Like, maybe not. No, he says 10 minutes at a time. Especially if you're trying to build density and metal, which it kind of seems like he is. Maybe not not as far as Corelli or someone like that, but still he is. And that's probably a good recommendation for 10 minutes of work at a time. Then it makes me wonder if his one for sopranos is really not crazy. 5 minutes at a time. But the other, so 10 minutes at a time. And then I highlighted here the other part that's really, really important. He has it like bookends at the beginning and end. Daily study with low and easy notes, no more than 10 minutes at a time. And taking this, at least for tenors, taking whatever you're calling your chest voice up to F sharp. I would say it sounds like he's probably coaching a metallic sound. I mean, the fact that he's... No, I guess that you can't tell just from this. Maybe like a reduced density metallic, something like what Bergonzi was doing, maybe. I don't know. And I don't think we can draw conclusions from this F sharp and E natural business, because that's where you would start tuning your timbre as opposed to just making a vowel with it, where you start to worry about, even if you're not thinking about it, when the voice kind of turns over, you're now no longer using whatever vowel you want or whatever timbre you want, whatever resonance you want. Now you want to tune the second resonance of the voice to the third harmonic. And we all know what that sounds. It sounds like the tenor voice turning over. That's what that is. It sounds the same when female voices turn over from their chest, especially if they were well, only really, no, especially if they were very metallic in their chest voice. Let's say a mezzo. Sometimes a soprano does it, even though it's not that many notes. Then when they go into this middle register, as Garcia calls it, the voice turns over. Something happens. And if it doesn't, you're going to wind up with a not very classical sound. And that, in my opinion, is this tuning of the second resonance to the third harmonic. I'm not sure if it's the same all the time for women, but basically for the boys, that's it. I'm not sure that there's another tuning that matters. I don't think there's F2 H4. So second resonance to the fourth harmonic. I don't think it's a thing really for tenors, but I'm not sure. Someone might look that up and have some other ideas, and I will gladly take a correction. But this area that he's talking about, basically everyone runs into that, and it has to do with acoustics, basically. And even if you're a baritone or a bass, there's going to be something going on in the same area. He's recommending baritones just stop, but I think some baritones, like Michael Spires, for instance, have found that you can just, if you just do the formant harmonic couplings that the tenors are doing, and you're not relying on neutral, then a lot of times, yeah, you can go higher. You can just go into the tenor range. And I'm not sure if he's doing like partial vibration or what, like how he's doing what he's doing. I think he's just pretty straightforward singing, and more or less following these rules, and singing not in the fullest density, but still metallic. Yeah. So anyway, we will look next time at chapter 4 or section 14, faults in voice production. So I'll put here that's where 6 ended, and we will start 7 here. So for episode 7, we'll start there. Let's get this off the screen. See if we have any more. Oops. Any more from the chats, and then if not, I will sign off. So let's see, guys. Dove got his dogs freaked out. Well, I'm sorry, Dove. But yeah, so if that's all the questions for today, I guess this is Mr. Opera, and this is Opera, signing off. I'm not going to tell you who the This Is Opera people are. They're anonymous, of course, but we're very close. That's all I'm going to say about that.
La donna qual più bel vento mutava di pensier di pensier